Welcome everybody to community meeting. Today is February 22nd, 2026, I think. And this is KCP 6
February 26th,
6th.
2026.
Yeah. And this is KCP community meeting. The meeting is governed by CHCF code of conduct, which boils down, be excellent to each other. And I might be slow today, so bear with me. Cool. So let's see what we have on the agenda. Cool. So before we jump into the agenda items, where is the chat here? Please add yourself to the attendees list so we know who was here. And is there anybody new on the call who want to introduce themselves, say hi, reintroduce themselves? I'm gonna give it a 1, 2, 3. Nobody? Cool. So I think most of us know each other already, so cool. So before, if no new introductions, let's jump straight to the agenda topics. Christoph, I think today's show is yours. So go ahead.
It's my day today. I'm always sorry for whoever watches the recording. So, first agenda point is just a quick announcement or reminder. Marco has very graciously fought the fight with the people, not upstairs, but above us. And we have now finished all the discussions. The vote on the mailing list has concluded. And we have officially decided that KCP is always spelled lowercase, no matter where you spell it, in the title, in the heading, doesn't matter, it's always lowercase. I've rebased the pull request in KCP that changes all the references. I hope the last remaining E2E test passes now and nothing else gets nudged in between. So yeah, from now on, please try to lowercase KCP if you get a chance to do it. And Marco, once again, thanks for your engagement there. If no one else has anything to say for that, then we can just move on to the other two.
I think everything was said already in the mailing list and discussions.
Good point. So let's quickly move on. We all want to go home. So next point is just a question. Short question is, can you scope down virtual workspaces? It's like the tenancy virtual workspace. Because the init agent currently works by directly connecting to clusters to read workspace types. It needs to read workspace types as part of its operation. And I was considering rewriting this to just use the virtual workspace for the tenancy API export. Because, hey, why not? We have it already. But then I thought, this only works if you have permissions in the root workspace to give you access to this virtual workspace. And once you have access to it, I think you have it more or less for the entirety of KCP. So if I have a KCP setup where I host like 5 different organizations, and one of that organization has a team that wants to use the init agent for their own initialization of workspace types, and the init agent has been written to use the virtual workspace, then that would suddenly become more or less impossible because you need root permissions. Root permissions as in permissions in the root workspace, not system masters. So my question is, I now, as the developer of a client tool that communicates with KCP and does something with KCP, if I choose the tenancy virtual workspace, I kind of limit the usability of my software a bit because it needs higher permissions.
By choose, you mean including tenancy APIs into the API export with all the identity hash and all that stuff?
No, by using, I mean directly using the virtual workspace for the tenancy API. I'm not claiming it in my API.
Okay, so you just you mean accessing the API export endpoint slice directly from the root workspace?
Yeah.
Okay.
technically, it's about the permission for the /content sub address thingy, so I can access the virtual workspace. How I get the URL, that's a different topic then. But the problem is the virtual workspace itself is just one global view across everything. And
Right.
any software that is written to use this kind of requires you to have like global admin permissions in KCP to set it up once, to give you permissions. That's why I now think I will not rewrite the init agent and instead keep it the way it is, connect directly to the workspaces where the workspace types are located that it needs to read, because then it only needs RBAC in those workspaces. And that makes the init agent more usable for people who just have a small subtree in KCP and are not like root owners. It's only really
Yeah.
the tenancy API, like other API exports from your own company and stuff, probably not, but yeah, that was just the thought that I had when I thought about this. So using the tenancy API export limits your usability of your software to some extent, a little bit. The init agent, it's somewhat doable. We could have a command line flag that toggles between two different runtime modes. But that's because the init agent only needs to read workspace types and nothing else. If you want to do more, then that choice wouldn't just be a small toggle. So do we think something about that? Is this just obvious to everyone? Is this something we want to address?
So
I don't think how we could.
why? How it's currently? Okay, can you give me a rundown how it's currently operates? Like you
The
create a
init agent-
workspace type in your own workspace.
Yeah. And then you need to provision RBAC in your workspace to let the init agent in. And then
Yes.
somewhere else you configure the init target that points to your workspace and to the workspace type init. But the init target references the workspace type it should initialize.
And remind me.
And I need to read the workspace types because I need to determine the initializer name. And the initializer name for a workspace type is always cluster name followed by the workspace type name. But the reference in the init target to the workspace type is a cluster path or workspace path. It's not the cluster name. I need to resolve the cluster path like root, my org, my team to some cluster name so I can build the initializer name. That's the whole reason why the init agent needs currently to access workspace types.
And one can have workspace types in their own workspaces, right? Like, I mean, in anywhere in the hierarchical tree.
As long as you have a little bit of RBAC provisioned in that workspace, yeah.
Yeah, so well, the other alternative which I was thinking, so you know how when you have a virtual API export virtual workspace, there is a API binding available for that virtual workspace. Even if you don't claim it, it's there. We could do something like that too for a workspace types. But the question is which virtual workspace it would target.
It's another option that currently the init agent doesn't use API exports to install its own CRDs. It just comes with like 2 CRDs that are installed in a workspace.
Yeah.
Because the thought was I want to be able to initialize workspace types from anywhere in KCP. We could maybe also say the init agent comes with an API export. And if you want to initialize a workspace in some other workspace, you need to bind the API export there, not to make our API available, but to have a permission claim so that we can then grab the workspace types from there. Nilo.
Wouldn't that make the application, so the way how you can deploy the init agent smaller, because then you will have to have the configuration in KCP, Whereas right now you can just deploy the init agent basically anywhere, point it at the KCP instance, and say, yeah, you are now responsible for setting up the workspaces here. So it sounds like the user would have to do more setup to achieve the same result, which I don't like.
I think it's a two different use case. It's currently, I'm a user, there is a shared KCP instance, I'm a user, I'm bringing in init agent myself into my tree. Where if init agent would have an API export, it's basically init agent as a service in a way. Where with, I think, bit of more magic, you could make one init agent serve a whole platform. So anybody who wants to use it just binds to their workspace, where the workspace types is, and does these things.
Maybe I'm not sure if all the init sources that the init agent can process will always be public, and you always want to share that with the platform. Maybe this is a private Git repository somewhere, and I don't know.
But like they need to be in the platform, no?
The manifests at the end that are being rendered, yes, but technically the init agent, not right now, but it could just read from a Git repository, render a bunch of YAML files, and pump them.
That's what I'm saying. It's a two different use case. One is I bring my own, potentially with my own data sources, Gits, S3 or whatever. Another one is it's predefined APIs in a platform. You subscribe it as a service.
Yes,
but
in that sense, yes.
Yeah, the tenancy one, I don't like it to be exposed. It's a very much privileged platform admin concept. And I think maybe let's leave it as it is for now, and we can iterate on this if we run into Blocker. I would personally like the as a service approach, because that integrates nicer into the like a platforms itself. But we cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say the service approach is a nice idea, but let's maybe shelve that for when we actually have a need for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that was my general thought about, like, when you choose a specific API export KCP, do you limit where your software can be used? And apparently, kind of a little bit, yeah. So that's just something I wanted to share or bring up. Thanks for whoever's taking notes, by the way. Cool. Are there any further comments to that, or should I speed run us to the finish line? Okay, let's do a speed run. KCP operator v2. I talked in the last few days with some colleagues, and we identified a number of drawbacks in the current KCP operator design. For example, it deploys two different client CAs, which makes reusing a kube config from a front proxy against a shard impossible. It's kind of annoying, and just we wanted to make it really secure, but maybe we overshot the goal a little bit. Likewise, URL configuration is a little bit complicated. To that extent, may I quickly share my screen? I am asking, even though I have permissions. Yes, present now. Please don't laugh. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it. But we went through just an example of what kind of deployment scenarios we can imagine for KCP, right? Scenario A is just a root shard, and then root shard with front proxy, root shard with standalone virtual workspace, root shard with virtual front proxy, multiple shards, all this good stuff. Just to maybe slowly figure out what kind of URLs and what kind of flags you actually have to set and where. Because I couldn't fully understand what all these URLs actually mean. And what we realized is that what the operator currently offers doesn't make this, we will share this, or I will put this document somewhere else later, don't have to make screenshots now. The operator doesn't really abstract this very well. But instead, it just gives you more or less plain direct access to all these flags, and it's confusing, and we think we can do better nowadays. And the last thing is, things like the front proxy. When we originally began working on the KCP operator, I thought most KCP setup will run with multiple front proxies, and most traffic will go through the front proxies. Over the last years, I've learned that's probably not really the case. Much traffic goes directly to the shards. Shards are public. Originally, I thought shards would be kind of private. So there's a lot of cruft that has accumulated in the operator. Also, the naming scheme for Kubernetes objects kind of sucks. It's probably pretty easy to create a naming conflict in the secrets and certificates that the operator creates, just because the naming scheme is also kind of. So I think we still have time to kind of do an overhaul of the KCP operator, take into account what we've learned over the last few years, and just fix a couple of things. I would be glad to create an epic and the tickets for that, and then hopefully get this done. What I'm not sure about it is how migrations would work. If you keep your etcds, that should be easy. But since all the certificate names will change, probably, I don't know yet, or deployment names will change, I'm not sure if this can be done in a smooth migration. And I'm not sure if this should be a new API version, or if we just mangle version 1 alpha 1 again. I remember we talked last time about, let's not have alpha, it's kind of, so maybe this should just be version 2 of the operator. What are your thoughts? Simon, you were first.
Yeah, first, +1 from my, so general really good idea as someone who's just set it up for load testing, was struggling through it, 100% with it. I am fully on board with making this breaking, in the sense of both give it a new version number, like major version number, and also give the APIs completely separate version numbers, because it just gives us the best flexibility. I think we've learned a lot about how these setups should be. I would now give to MJ and Nilo first, because I have a related but not directly related question afterwards. So MJ, go next, please.
So my biggest concern is that we spent last year pushing people to operator from Helm, and now we're saying it's a breaking change. Like I myself maintain like 3 or 4 installations of this using KCP operator, which I don't want to burn them. I can't burn them down and recreate it. So migration path, I think there should be something, even if this means scale down the operator, like it's unmanaged, and now the new version pops up and adopts the objects with gradual restarts and recertificating, as you said, if the storage is there, things are there. So somebody with a maintenance window could restart the setup, or potentially, can we do it in place somehow? Like, is that changes so such a big that we need breaking changes? Because I think it's we're still very much young project, complicated but young, and I wouldn't want to throw this kind of breaking stuff into the community and saying like, hey, now you have to burn your deployments without a path forward. I don't think we have that credibility yet to do that.
If your data and etcd survive but nothing else, is that for you catastrophic or still acceptable? Because I can't guarantee that even certificates will stay the same. If you create new certificates, all your kube configs will be invalidated.
Yeah, and that's the things which you would need to address. Like we have this kube config feature. Like what does it mean now at let's say hypothetical scenario, you scale down the KCP operator. You can't nuke the objects, because if you nuke kubeconfig objects, this object kubeconfig goes away. Like, do you delete partially them, and once the new version picks up, it regenerates the certs, and you say, hey, now go and redistribute the certs to your integration points, like CI, CTs, and things like that. So while I like the idea of cleaning, I'm a bit on a back foot on the impact of this, and I think we need to understand the changes, understand how much the impacts will do.
I would guess that like 98% of the CRDs will stay the same. The changes I envision there are very small, and with the name changes, I don't know yet.
So
How
can
much
we
will it change?
maybe we can do that in place, like with some mini migration webhook or whatever. Just
I have no idea yet. The impact there. I just see the naming scheme and I get a bellyache. So I want to, maybe we just need to investigate and make one small tweak to prevent naming conflicts. I don't know yet.
yeah, I mean,
Something I think has to change there.
so maybe separate mini doc or epic, as you said, and where we collected, like maybe not even doc, GitHub issue, where we collect the requirements. It's just from the adoption's perspective, I don't want to throw people saying like, hey, this nukes half of your setup. Just not a nice thing to do to the community.
Nilo.
Yeah, I think migration is not going to be a problem. I think it's going to be very clear how we can migrate the resources from the old style to the new style once we have a clear picture of where we want to be. Because right now we just know that we have some problems like naming the certificates and stuff. And I don't think that it's going to be much of a problem to migrate once we know where we want to go and where we want to be with our configuration. And so far, I would say just get going, make a new version of the, not necessarily new version, but spec out what you imagine the CIDs to look like, how you want to configure this with the new knowledge, and then see how we can adjust the existing stuff and if this needs to be breaking or not. And for migration, absolutely, we should offer a migration path, and I don't think that's going to be a problem. Because there is not that much that is bad. The only thing is the URL configuration and the naming of the certificates and the certificate layout, but that's all fixable, in my humble opinion.
No, it's like if it's automated, we can like semi-automated even. I think we can try it, and we have enough deployments to test these things, like write this operator v2, try to upgrade from one to another, and see where things flops. Like we have the testing ground, just question of priority and time.
Do we want to spend the effort of making this a second API version, setting up conversion webhooks and all the shebang that comes with that?
I would see, before we decide if we need a new version, I would see if we actually need one. So just look at what is the target and then decide if we actually need a new version.
That makes sense.
Yeah, maybe it's just a question of adding new fields, duplicating the data for one release, and in the next upgrade, these fields are like deleted.
No, because the biggest eyesore is the external with the port, and that's just a matter of, hey, if it's we deprecate it, and if it's present, we just rewrite it to the new field, and then we're done. That's the biggest point. And for the certificates, we'll find a way to migrate from old style to new style.
So yeah, that's my suggestion for the community. I would like to move us in that direction. I think this will help, and I'd rather pull the band-aid off now than later. Good, thank you for your time. Any more comments, Simon?
All right, this kind of leads me to a follow-up question. If I have a full front proxy and everything set up, why does the front proxy need to do TLS termination?
You are opening a can of worms that I don't really want to discuss right now.
For what? For which TLS termination?
Yeah. So while setting all of it up for load testing, now I realized that basically what you do is you cannot really put a TLS terminating gateway in front of it because it's expected that the front proxy does the TLS termination. Like front proxy only listens on HTTPS, and it basically requires to do that. And I was hoping there was a simple answer for it and not a can of worms. But I thought after seeing all the architecture picture, that would be a valid question. But I'm also fine if we do it in a separate. Yes, Dilo, go ahead.
So we need TLS because I don't think you can configure anything in KCP to run without HTTPS. And because we run a lot with certificate authentication and authorization. So there's not really a way to say, yeah, we are doing termination. It might be possible. But at the very least, the cross-shard communication would probably break down unless we switch the how they are talking with each other. But yeah, overall, even if you were to not use a front proxy, theoretically, if that were possible, even then it wouldn't. You couldn't not do PTLS pass-through. Yeah.
Wait, but when a shard wants to talk to another shard, it uses the same front proxy port / entry than I do when I talk with front proxy.
Right.
Yes
Yeah,
and no.
No, same. It goes above and then lands down. It just uses certificate authorization.
Yeah, but it goes all the way around. Yeah, okay. I go into thinking mode again. All my questions.
But
Why we can't terminate it? Because kubeAPI server doesn't allow it. kubeAPI server requires the TLS certificates to be served. You can't serve API server on a non-secure TLS port. What you can do re-encryption, meaning you put certs in front, you terminate and re-encrypt. But your gateway will have to trust the certificates.
Okie dokie.
So it's not. It wasn't our decision. It's a kubeAPI server decision long time ago.
All right, I go back into my thinking cave now. I don't like it, but I understand it. Thanks for the info.
Don't think in a cave. Ask in a channel. Start a chat, and we can brainstorm there if you have any questions.
Where's your need coming from to pre-terminate the TLS? Is this just because of another shortcoming in the operator?
No, it has nothing to do with operator. It was just me thinking about, hey, isn't KCP like any other web server? And if I do any other web server, like it's just for a, can we simplify this kind of perspective? But I'm grudgingly happy with the answer. We can't.
So my bigger take is, before Kubernetes existed, everybody was running everything with TLS certificates because we didn't have these like services, service mesh, and all that stuff. It was always a certificate there. It was WebLogic, JBoss, or something. Kubernetes came in and introduced this concept now of services, ingresses, and Nginx, and people started relaxing and deploying applications on port 8080 because the cert's somewhere above in a load balancer, in a gateway, and something. But the Kubernetes itself was built on the patterns which was before there, where everything and everywhere needed TLS certificate, secure by default. I think we just got used in the last 10 years deploying pods on insecure ports because somewhere above us has enough security and can terminate the TLS certs for us. That's my ranting opinion.
Yeah.
Cool. That was fun. That will be fun to read in the transcript. Okay. I already opened this into open floor area because I think it looked like this. So I want to ask, is there anybody else? Is there any other topics people want to bring in, discuss, raise? Going once. Going twice. So Ola, if I may, I bring our DM conversation out. So Ola was mentioning that he was contributing a lot in the last months, quite a few months. He expressed that our sharding model is still a bit unclear, poorly documented, and that's all points to our side. And we are thinking maybe doing a like a knowledge session, deeper dive of the sharding itself, maybe sometime next week, of the concepts. What do you need to be aware when it comes to sharding? Meaning, we have these informers with fallbacks, objects distributed in a cache, not the infrastructure deployment stuff, but the coding level stuff. And the question is if people are interested in that, and should we do that? I see the thumbs ups in the recording, so this feels like we need to do that.
Guido.
Yeah, I love the idea. Very cool. And I would like to maybe record that session then. Not to just display it, but to afterwards go through it to write documentation from any of the things that we mentioned, any of the questions that came up, so that we have a proper reference in the documentation later on. So we can just keep asking things. It won't be published anywhere. It's just for reference for then afterwards writing the documentation.
I think I'm fine with recording because I will be bluntly honest. I will not have enough time to prepare everything to the letter, so it's right. So we will need to contribute to this together, and if we start talking nonsense, I will expect people to raise it and say it's nonsense. But
Yeah,
after
but
that, yes, recording can be used to flesh it out and document it clearly. Yes.
exactly. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I would volunteer to write the documentation. That's not a problem. But that just that we can start and spruce up our documentation, because we have a lot of documentation and it's partially very old and not complete. And yeah, we just need to
Cool.
get on top of that. Oh,
So
thanks.
I will
Cool
try to
idea.
squeeze it sometime. That's kudos to Ola to raising that. I think we live in enough bubbles, and it's good that people making this bubble pop sometimes. Cool. And with this, any other topics? Announcements? Fun things to share? If no, maybe we can close this a bit early, and I give you a few minutes back. Cool. With this, thank you for attending. That was, as always, fun meeting, and see you in 2 weeks.